Ladies and gentlemen, our nation adopted the democratic way of governance almost 70 years ago. In 1950, we accepted the rule of people and the representational form of governing. A lot has changed since. India as a country has bloomed to find its own identity at the global stage. Though we have adapted over the journey to today, a lot needs to change. And all of us in this auditorium have a perspective about this. To take us through the kind of political reforms India should be having a dialogue on, we have our next speaker. He is a second-term member of parliament who represented the Pilibhit constituency in 2009 and was elected from the Sultanpur constituency in 2014, winning both elections by record margin. He was the youngest ever national secretary of the BJP from 2008 to 2011, and the youngest ever national general secretary of the party from 2011 to 2014. He is a widely respected opinion leader and a policy analyst, writing widely in English, Hindi, and other regional languages, making him the widest read columnist in the country, reaching over 200 million readers. His latest book, A Rural Manifesto, Realizing India's Future Through Her Villages, was published in November this year, becoming the #1 best-selling non-fiction book of 2018. In this wide-ranging book, he presents an alternative approach to the mainstream ideas of rural development, which, despite their many definitive achievements, have their inherent limitations. The book explores the viability of a village as a single standalone socio-economic unit. Please put your hands together for Shri Varun Gandhi.
I'm actually going to be speaking on political reform today, so is it okay if I just put these books there? Yeah. Otherwise it'll look like too obvious a plug. Yeah, I don't know. I was in Brazil a couple of years ago, and I was at a thought leadership forum, and there was a general. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was a serving general by the name of Hamilton Mourão. And they asked him. They said, how do you think we can solve the problem of corruption in the Brazilian polity? How do you, because the Petrobras scandal had happened, so almost 1/3 of the MPs were charge sheeted, in jail, etc. I said, how do you think we can deal with this problem? And he said, very simply, we shoot the politicians and we take over the country militarily. And I was a little frightened and also happy that nobody knew who on earth I was. And but everybody got up and gave him a standing ovation. That gentleman today is the Vice President of Brazil. And so it got me thinking about why you have Brexit, why you have this election of Donald Trump, why you have forces all over the world that are militating against the status quo in politics. Why do you have a working class revolt against the political elite? Why do you have a sense that globalization has failed to carry with it all the discontents, all the malcontents, all the people that are left behind, really? Why do you have politicians all over the world that are blaming the other successfully and coming to power, very, very quickly? And so it made me think about the need for political reform in India, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to start by talking about elections, not just because we have elections round the corner in India, but because unfortunately in India we always have elections round the corner, whether it's Panchayat or Lok Sabha or whatever. And one of the reasons why there is endemic and systemic corruption is because inadvertently you have people who seek to bolster their chances in elections by seeking economic fortification before. And that is why corruption stays. But this system is not, and I want to give you a statistic, which is that in the 2014 election, 81% of the time, the richest candidate fighting the election won. And 100% of the time, the poorest candidate in 543 constituencies lost their deposit. 100% of the time. So it just got me thinking, I mean, is there any space for, forget the last man in society, even for middle class people on the strength of their ideation, do they have any place in the political status quo at all? Even if you take the example of America, right, which is supposedly the fountainhead of global democracy, where you have a system of super PACs or political action committees, which is basically a legal form of lobbying, you know, from trade unions, from rich individuals, from corporations, etc. Just in the last election, the Koch brothers, who you've heard of, who's the second richest family in America after the Walmart family, the Waltons, they first spent $60 million trying to defeat Donald Trump and then spent $350 million trying to get him elected. And that election, you know, had major political parties together with super PACs spending $9 billion. It just, you know, got me thinking about how that money could have been put to good use. I mean, I remember Vajpayee saying something very important where he said every politician starts their political journey with a lie, and that is how much money they spend at election time, your affidavit. And, you know, what does it mean? What do we do in India? Can we look at public funding of elections? It's difficult because it's a poor country and there are better ways to appropriate government money. But a lot of countries now have, Australia, Germany, etc., do have public funding of elections. What do we do? You know, how do we curb the way in which these democratic rights of people are sometimes curtailed? In Norway, for instance, they have a very interesting method of fighting elections, which is the entire election end to end is 10 days. And there's no hoardings, there's no posters, there's no billboards, there's no public assembly of more than 1,000 people, there's no television ads, there's no radio ads, there's no newspaper ads. So even if you want to spend that money, exactly what can you spend it on, right? I mean, in India, you know, all of us ask the question that why are there casteist, communal, you know, regional, sub-regional forces? And I'll be very honest in telling you why. It's because the last man in society, they have no idea what you stand for ideationally, right? So they feel that if all these people stand for very little, then let's choose this person who has in identity politics some similarity to me because I may have a greater in with them. I mean, even if you had open source debates where people could come forth, where people could, you know, be given a certain amount of time compulsorily on all television channels, where people are asked questions on labor reform, on agriculture, on job creation, on foreign policy, or on anything, right? Would we not have a more, refined process? Let's look at the Election Commission, right? The Election Commission has many aspects to it which are good and which we should celebrate. However, the Election Commission does not have the power to file cases after the elections are over. So really, what function does it serve? It also has a budget that is lower than the budget of Sweden's Election Commission. And we have 594 million people who went to vote last time. Sweden has, I think, 8 million, if I'm not mistaken, right? look at the transparency guidelines, which is basically who donated what money to who, right? They're not binding in law. I mean, I put a RTI, and I want to tell you about this. I was studying the BSP's case in Supreme Court, because the BSP was hauled up over their donations being suspect. And the BSP, when they gave their case, which they in fact won surprisingly enough, said that 86% of all their donors had died within 1 year of giving a donation, so they had no idea who they were. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. No party in India has been de-recognized by the Election Commission for withholding information, other than Mr. P.A. Sangma's party, called the National People's Party, I think, which didn't give any information for 2 years after the deadline, gave information one day, and they were re-recognized the next day. So I'm not sure that the punishment really fit the crime. You know, I just want to put some thoughts down. What about compulsory voting, right? A lot of people say that compulsory voting is very majoritarian, and, you know, it possibly is not in the keeping with constitutional democracy. But I have a different thought, and it is not my opinion. I'm just putting forward a thought, which is that if you look at all over the world who votes, look at who votes in Europe, look at who votes in America, you will find that the poorest people don't vote, right? That's in part why Donald Trump ended up getting elected, right? Because a lot of people who feel socially disenfranchised don't vote. They're not invested in the process. In India, in some places, I've seen this very closely. You will see this in urban constituencies in India in a big way. You know, that people just don't feel connected to the political process and they don't come out. So if you have compulsory voter registration and compulsory voting, will it in fact shift the political party's focus on messaging rather than just on mobilizing voter turnout? Because right now the entire effect is just get people to vote for me. The impact of messaging has largely been lost. You know, what about, when we look at, for instance, women in politics, right? Everybody talks about women in politics and women's reservation. I'm also pro-women's reservation. But what does women's reservation mean? I mean, you go to any village in India, you have reservation in panchayats, right? But you go to any village in India and you sit on stage, on that little stage they make for you, you'll find all men are sitting there. And then where you say, where is the village pradhan, right? Where's the village headman? And you'll find one lady on the side of the stage with her ghungat there sitting on the ground. And you'll say, where's the pradhan? And they'll say, there's the pradhan. And then you look at this hatta katta sand next to you sitting on the stage. And you'll say, brother, who are you? And he'll say, main pradhan pati hoon. You know? And it is so frightening because now India is full of an army of MP patis, Vidhayak patis, Pradhan patis, BDC patis, Zilla Panchayat patis. And this has now officially entered the lexicon of the Niti Aayog and earlier what was the Planning Commission. It's officially in government record that Ram Kumar Verma, Pradhan Pati of so-and-so. I mean, women's reservation cannot be a symbolic catalyst just to get people's wives, sisters, and mothers into the process. You know, when I was elected from Sultanpur, we had a Zilla Panchayat election. And I said to people, I said, look, you always say that poor people don't get a chance. Common people don't get a chance. So if I put up absolutely untested people from non-political backgrounds under the age of 40, will you give them a chance? Because they don't have money to give you, they don't have alcohol to ply you with, they don't have cast to talk at you. But if I give you a fresh crop of people, will you vote for them, including half women? And they said yes. And we tried it. And you know what? About half those people won. So I feel that if political parties, have the gut and have the heart to be experimental in their approach and are large-hearted to take these risks, a lot of the times people will respond positively to them. I have been an MP for 10 years now, and I've never drawn a salary as an MP because I donate the salary every month to the family of either a farmer who has committed suicide, or a soldier, or people who live in riparian communities, or anybody where I feel the main, earning member has passed on. And I felt that those of us who, don't need it should not be a burden on the system. And I wrote a letter to all the people in Parliament who had declared assets at over 20 crores, which I felt was a pretty healthy limit. And I wrote to them saying that, in fact, your state has some, and Andhra Pradesh, I think, has a little more. And I wrote to them and I said that, would you voluntarily give up your salary as a gesture? It doesn't mean very much to you. And I did not get one single letter back. And let's be honest, for a few weeks after that, I sat alone in Central Hall. And nobody talked to me after that. I just felt it was strange because the average net worth of MPs has risen every time since 1952 to 2014. Every single election has seen an escalated average net worth. I don't know if it's a trend, but I thought it was interesting. My mother lives in a place called Jantar Mantar Road in Delhi, and I had gone to see her. And Jantar Mantar also, I don't know if any of you are from Delhi, but it's also the place where people agitate. From all over you can come and you can sit on dharna and you can say your woes. And so I was passing by, and I do stop there, many times, just talk to people, learn and see how we can help out. And that day they were all farmers from Tamil Nadu, and they were sitting there, they had shaved their heads, and they were protesting in a very, very vocal manner. And they were all farmers, and I said, okay, I will take up your issue. And the next day I saw that they said that the Tamil Nadu Assembly will have a special session. And I said, that's great, because obviously they're having it because 10,000 farmers are sitting in Delhi. And they did have a special session, but the special session was to give all the MLAs of the Assembly a double in their salary. Like they increase it by double. And I thought that was kind of perverse, And so I spoke in Parliament and I said that all MPs and all MLAs in this country cannot arrogate to themselves the right to increase their salaries at will. I'm here at ISB today. All of you are going to go out into the professional world and be wildly successful. And there are so many people here who are professors, part of the establishment. How do you get a salary increase? You demonstrate value, right? You work hard, you do chamchagiri to the right people, or whatever. But you demonstrate value, you show hard work, you show experience, you put in the hours, and then you hope for the best. And you know how MPs increase their salary? Like this, by raising their hand, and it's done. And I thought this was kind of crass and also undemocratic. And I said, this can't be right. And since I became an MP, MPs increased their salaries 4 times. And I thought, well, I'm not sure if this is the right way forward for a country. And so, and I went all over the country and I spoke to people like you. And I just said that I asked them, how many of you are on Twitter? And a lot of people would raise their hands. How many people are on Facebook? And a lot of people would raise their hands. And I said, why don't you write into the powers that be and tell them that this is one issue where things should change. And I really didn't think it had any impact, because you go and people do often greet you and stuff, and then you think they forget because everyone's doing so much. And one fine day, I got a call from the finance minister who said, can you come and meet me? And I said, certainly. And I went to call on him. And he said, so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are writing in from across the country. And I just think you should not rile people up like this. And I said, I have no role in it. I just go and say my piece. And he said, no, you'll be happy to know. And in the last budget, they did bring in an institutional mechanism whereby now MPs and MLAs cannot increase their salary at will, and there are constitutional bodies that will look at cost of living, their work, standard of living, etc., 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 and now decide. And that is not my power, that is your power, and that's why we come to these places. In Denmark, they actually got constitutionally a salary increase, but in Copenhagen they had the main paper which did a poll where 55% of people said, we don't think these guys deserve their salaries. So the MPs at will rejected it after getting it. And I would like to see that level of moral compass in India. I would like to. I'm not hopeful of it, but I would like to. Anytime you talk to a parliamentarian or a political leader, they'll always say something in response, in a defense mechanism. They'll say, but we're elected. हम तो चुनाव जीत के आए हैं, we're public representatives. But really, what does this mean and how true is this statement? Farooq Saab won a by-election recently from Srinagar. He got 4.8% of the vote. Is he representative of everybody in Srinagar? Why should I take his name, right? I didn't get 50% of the vote. I got it the first time round, and I didn't get it the second time round. I was very acutely aware that I didn't have an overwhelming mandate. And so I called all the people who had stood against me. And I said, listen, you've probably got a lot of things to say about this constituency and its path forward that I don't know. And I'm also an outsider. So give me a cup of tea at your house and call the other people who fought. And first I think they thought I was trying to get them to defect to the party or something. And once they knew that wasn't on the cards, then they were fine. And then we sat together and I said, let's run this constituency together, right? What does it matter? Because at some point, we've got to stop thinking of politics as war. And, look at it as competitive policy reform, because that's really what it should be. Let's look at the performance of Parliament. Parliament is just ended the 16th Parliament. So from 1952 to 1972, Parliament worked at 145 days a year. In the last 20 years, Parliament has worked for 65 days a year. And in the last 20 years, 64% of all legislation passed in Parliament has been passed without 1 second's deliberation in Parliament. 64% of Parliament's bills, rules, laws have been passed without any Parliament debate. That's a lot. And 71% has been passed without sending to any political standing committee or consultative committee. Now, if Parliament is not an instrument of deliberation, then exactly what purpose does it serve? You look at Parliament, which is meant to be a law-making body which adds to the body of knowledge, right? And I often go to the Parliament library because that's supposed to be one of the repositories of knowledge. And I promise you, every time I go, I feel it's the loneliest place on earth. And every time I go, the librarian, she almost hugs me, because I think she hasn't seen a person in about 10 days, And I went to Washington, and I saw the Congressional Research Service, which is 600 people, if you want to speak on on women's issues or on LGBT issues or on labor reform or on South American issues or whatever, there is a PhD from that issue that is working there, they're employed there. And it's such a pleasure to talk to them, and they will tell you everything and then say, you take your call, whichever side of the fence you're on. In India, there must be a reason that parliamentary debate is of such a high quality. That's all I want to say. We have, in 1952, talking about professionalism in politics, right? In 1952, 1% of people declared themselves as professional politicians. 1%. Because there were lawyers, there were barristers, there were professors, there were artisans, there were farmers, there was teachers. 1%. And in 2014, it was 29%. That's almost 1/3 of people who said, we do nothing and we have no other interests other than politics. That to me is very frightening, because if that's what you bring to the table, just winning and losing elections, then are you really the best person to take this country forward? I don't know, I'm just asking. I don't think we should have professional politicians. We need people who come into politics with other interests, academic, life interests, a certain, repository of knowledge or of life experience. You don't have to be a PhD, right? You don't even have to have formal education, but you need a certain amount of wisdom, which comes only through putting yourself through the grind. That's what I feel. Bureaucrats, right? The bulwark of everything necessary in our system. So I did a RTI. I came across a gentleman, and I'm not going to take names here, who headed a nationalized bank for a very long time. And 6 months after quitting as the CMD of this very big bank, he went to work as a consultant for somebody that owed 12,000 crores to that bank. Now, while this may be a giant coincidence, I think it's probably not, right? And I put in an RTI. Satyanand Mishra was Information Commissioner and he was very good. And I said, I want to know, and I want to tell you this today because this is something that's very important. 30% of bureaucrats, including and above the rank of Joint Secretary, are taking preliminary retirement and have taken it over the last 15 years. 30%. Now this is very bizarre, right? If you get to the rank of a brigadier, wouldn't you want to hang in there and become a general? I guess you would, right? That's the whole point of being in the army. So why would you get to Joint Secretary, chuck it up, and go into the private sector? I don't know. Why do you think? Right? 30% of people working in the same industry in which the government has invested scholarship upon them, right? Now, I don't want to take any names just in case ISB's funding all dries up. Because a lot of those dudes, I think, have put in some stuff here. But I will say this, right? It is immoral. It is a huge conflict of interest, and it should not happen, right? If you're working in urban development and then you go and work for a real estate company, that is not correct. That is what is happening, and that is something that we should be. I wrote an article on this, and anyway, when we, look at youth in politics, because a lot of people, Sebastian Kurz in Austria is 31, Jacinda Ardern is 38 in New Zealand. What's the truth about youth? Because youth is such a buzzword and everybody's talking about young people in politics. What is the truth of it? Because I believe in facts. So in 1952, the average age of an Indian was 44. In 2014, the average age of an Indian is 32 and a half. In 1952, the average age of an MP was 46. In 2014, the average age of an MP was 59. So the country is getting younger, but the polity is getting older. Not necessarily a bad thing, I just wanted to point it out. You know, we always talk about corruption, right? Everybody's talking about corruption. But where does corruption come from? See, one of the things you have to understand is this whole myth of good people entering politics, right? I don't believe in that, because if you have an inherently corrupt mechanism, good people turn not so good very quickly, right? So what is the answer? I have one suggestion. It's a very simplistic suggestion. Monithon, which European Union has done to look at its public good expenditure, is an open source data platform where even when they build a bridge or even when they build a waterway or a road, they have 100% expenditure platform out there for you to see. You can ask questions and they will tell you in 24 hours by law. And also, if you know that 100 million is being spent on a road, they tell you every day how much is to be spent. Then they tell you if you don't meet that target, why didn't they meet that target? Even the laborers' phone numbers are on there. That's how detailed it is. Now in India, let's say in Hyderabad, right, some road is being made and you see that the material that's being poured into that road is substandard. Who do you go to? Do you go to your councillor? Do you go to the MP? Do you go to the MLA? Do they know the contractor? Will the contractor even listen to people? Will you get access to him? These are fundamental questions. Because let's be honest, right? It is the opacity of information that causes corruption in India. If information dissemination was transparent, corruption would not be a fraction of what we know that it is. And it doesn't come from a good man or a good person, right? It comes from eliminating the possibilities of human error. That's what I feel. I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I feel very strongly about this. I mean, in my constituency, we've got a website and we put out every single work that we do and we put out the progress on that work. So tomorrow, if that person is cheating, somebody from the constituency can write into me or call me and say, listen, you've put this out, but it's not reflective of the reality because this is really what is happening and here's a snapshot of it. And I am bound then by my own method to correct that. So if that is what we put into place, then we won't be sorry. People power. This book was started in a small village in Uttarakhand called Rehni, where the Chipko movement started from in Almora. And I thought, now we've got the information revolution, the communication revolution. How have things moved forward? And I don't know if there's anybody here from Bangalore, but I was in Bangalore a few years ago when the steel flyover project was being built. And young people saw that 4,000 trees were getting cut, so they made a WhatsApp group called Jatka, and they said that anybody who puts a missed call on it, we'll assume is with us. And 1.6 lakh people gave a missed call in one day. And they felt emboldened, and then they did a human chain around those trees. And then the chief minister had to backtrack, and then they said they'll build the steel flyover, but without cutting a single tree. And that's the power of young people. That's Chipko 2016. Even this scheme of the BBMP pothole reporter in Bangalore, where if you have a pothole and you take a snapshot of that pothole and you put it on the BBMP pothole reporter, and if it is not filled within 48 hours, every day that goes by, you get 100 rupees in your account, and that 100 rupees is deducted from the municipal engineer that's supposed to look at it. I thought that was excellent. Right? I wish they had it right here. And the idea came from a young boy from Hyderabad called Ravi Teja, who was actually, filling potholes with his friends in the city. And so this, and it's not just, rich people or big people or empowered people. In my constituency, there's a neighboring district called Ambedkar Nagar, and Shimla Kumari was a laborer, a scheduled caste laborer at a brick kiln, at a Eat Ka Bhatta, and she went there, and one day she just didn't get her money, and they said, you can shove off. And she went to her relative who was a clerk at a labor commissioner in the district, and she said, and they said, how much money are you owed? And she said, we're owed 60 rupees a day for 2 days. And he said, that can't be right, because the government ordained rate for a full day of work is 120. And she said, for the same work, men get 120, and for the same work, women get 60. And this is absolutely true all over the country. And then the labor commissioner is a very good officer. And he said, if I give you a car, will you go across to all the women in this district who are working in these unofficial jobs and just get their affidavits and signatures and just put this down, to see how much work they've done and how much they should be paid in back payments over the last 1 year that I've been here? And they said, absolutely. And she did this for 6 months, and they paid 48 crore rupees to the poorest people in India back in their accounts. So, I mean, look at the example of Babar Ali. I don't know if you've heard of it. Babar was in you know it, right? Yeah, Murshidabad. So not too far. And Babar was the only guy who went to school. He was 9 years old in a small village called Bhapta in Murshidabad, Malda, the border. And he felt very guilty about this, that, he was the only person that went to school. And every day he would come back and he would teach people what he learned at the age of 9 and 10 underneath a big guava tree. And his fame grew, and so people started coming and listening to him. And CNN heard about him. Of course, nobody in the Indian media had heard about him. And I'm not knocking them, I'm just saying. And CNN heard about them, and they said, they gave him a World Heroes, Real Heroes of the Year award with 25 other people, got $50,000. And any other poor person would have put that money into buying land or a house or a tractor or whatever. And Babar said, no, the money has come from education, that's where it's going to go back. And with Shramdan, with free labor, he built a school which is actually bigger than this auditorium. And he said there are 3 rules in this school. 1, everybody who studies, studies free. 2, everybody who teaches, teaches free. 3, everybody who studies goes back to their villages and teaches 2 people what they've learned that day to pay it forward. And every village got very competitive, because they said, if Bhapta can do it, why can't we do it? And so there are 61 villages, they're big villages in that area. And so they all put all their village funds into schools. And today, what has 39% literacy, today that entire area has 100% literacy because of one boy. And the last example I really want to give is somebody from here, from Shrikant Bola. I don't know if you've heard of him. And you've all heard of him. And so I guess I shouldn't say the thing then. And has everybody heard of him? Okay, so Shrikant was born completely blind, right? And he was born completely blind, and he wanted to do science. And they said, you can't do science because you're blind, so how will you do the experiments? How will you do the syllabus? And he went to court in Hyderabad. And the court said, you can study whatever you want to study. And he did science. He got 99% in class 12. And after that, he sat for the IIT exam, and he got 160 rank, All India, which is, I guess, a big deal. And he got into IIT Delhi, and they refused to take him because they said, you're blind, so how will you walk? How will you go to the mess? How will you bathe, eat, do classes? We can't have 5 people minding you. So he took a gap year, and he applied to MIT. and he got a full scholarship in MIT. And he switched fields and he did astrophysics, which, as you know, is pretty tough. It's astrophysics. And he topped MIT. And after that, the US government, NASA, Google, Oracle, everybody said, come and work with us. We pay you whatever you want. And he said no, and he came to India and he made a company called Bollant Industries. Today it's touched 400 crores, and he works with the poorest people, and he, with areca nut leaves, etc., and they hire 2,000 people, 1,000 of whom are completely blind, And I just thought it was, because all of us in public life, you always feel the heat from time to time, and all of you feel somewhere that life hasn't done justice to you. And here was someone who didn't have light in his eyes and created it in the lives of so many people. And I just want to end by saying that, the reason I've come here today is to start a collaborative relationship with you. Politics is not the other, right? Politics today is in an era of unprecedented information exchange. And so the onus of changing things lies equally between all of us. I don't know, are most of you on some social media platform? Like, are any of you on Twitter? About half of you. And so I would like you to reach out to me, not to tell me anything else, but to tell me what issues you think I should fight for, what issues you think I should write about and highlight, what struggles you think people like me should take up and amplify. Because the reason I've come here is to start a relationship, and I realize that it is only through relationship building of this kind, thought leadership of this kind, that we can really get this country to where we need to. And I'm very positive about things, but positivity doesn't mean you don't shine a light on the dirt underneath the table. Positivity means that you get working to clean up the space. And I feel very strongly that all of you today, should invest not just in a life of success, but in a life of purpose, of meaning. And the reason that I believe that a broken system, I don't necessarily believe ours is a broken system, but if you look at politics all around the world, you do see a lot of broken systems. And I feel that broken systems can only be healed or helped by a citizen revolution. And the citizen revolution, the deepening of democracy, is really the reason why I'm here today. And I'm grateful for this privilege of your time. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll be more than happy to take any questions that you have. Yeah, the lady there. If you could just tell me your name and also where you're from, so that I have a vague idea.
Here's the mic. I'll give you the mic. In the interest of time, we'll be able to take only one question. So thank you so much.
Okay. I don't know whether to thank you or whether to castigate you.
Hi, Varun.
But I'll do both. Yeah, hi.
My name is Benazir. I'm from Chennai. I'm studying in ISB right now. My question to you is on the electoral bonds. You talked about reforming funding for political parties and so on. And there's a controversy on electoral bonds because it's not transparent and public may not know who's donating to which party.
Yeah.
What is your take on it?
I mean, it's a very good question. I think that what my take on it is not just on electronic bonds, but on all forms of electronic transfer. That I'll give you an example. In the state of Victoria in Australia, they had electronic transfers. And they said you have to declare it within 1 year of your getting the transfer, right? When eventually they declared it, after they had started the system, they found that over 60% of donations were from local casinos, right? So I think that if we have a system where you can get money from whoever you want, but you have to declare it within a week of getting it, then the public will at least know, frankly, who's funding your narrative. Are you sure that if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
I would request Jayant to hand over a memento to our esteemed guest.